Hey everybody, it's Margo at My Favorite Quilt Store, and I had some requests to show how to do paper piecing with freezer paper so that you don't have to pull the paper off at the end. So I'm going to give a quick tutorial on that because we're getting ready to start the solar flare sew along, and this would be easy to use for that particular quilt because you wouldn't have to pull the paper off, but you're going to have to make first of all, you're going to have to put your blocks on freezer paper. So you cannot put freezer paper through a laser printer because it makes it too hot and it doesn't work. The only thing you can put a freezer paper through would be an inkjet printer. So the first thing that I do is I mark an X on the top of the sheet that I've laid inside there and print something on to see which way the paper moves through the printer if you don't know, so that you make sure that you put the paper side to whatever side the printing side is going to happen to. So ours was facing, the slick side had to go down, the paper side had to go up. So that's the way my printer worked. But I would run a piece of paper with an X on it and decide if that's the side that it printed on or didn't print on of something that you're trying to print. So before you actually run freezer paper through your printer. So it only should go through an inkjet printer if you're going to do it that way. You can also hand draw. If your blocks are too big, you can hand draw them, or you can take them to a Kinko's or something and see if they have some sort of paper that you can put those on. So anyway, we've got that going on. So we did our block. We hand drew our block onto our freezer paper. And this is the block we're going to be making. It's a heart block. We have this for digital download on our website, so you can make the same exact block. But first I want to show you a couple of the tools that I use for paper piecing. And the first one is the add-a-quarter ruler that I use to add my 1/4 inch seam allowance on the inside of the block for the block. And I need a piece of like cardstock, hard paper, or something to use in the to flip my things back. And can you just get my box of freezer paper that I have right there? I forgot to bring the box of freezer paper over to show you. I just use the regular Reynolds freezer paper that you buy at the grocery store on the freezer paper aisle. I just automatically use that one when I'm making my paper piecing project. So we did just hand draw our block on here. We numbered it so we'd know which way we needed to piece. And then I put what colorations were on it because this is all white paper. When you piece, and you usually print out a paper piecing project, you have, it's shaded in the colors that you're using. So there's no guessing what colors you're supposed to be using there. But I went ahead and put a little W for white, B for blue, G for green on my sheets of paper so I'd know what I was doing. I got the first half of the block done so that we could just run through the second half of the block and put the block together. You can see how it goes. The other thing that I use is flower head pins when I'm doing my paper piecing. And I use a Sharpie because that will not, I don't use a pencil, I use a Sharpie because that will not come off on anything that I'm doing. So I've got some glue here. Don't always use it that much, but I have that there. And here's my pins. So I'm going to get started on my block. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I need my green color, because that's block, or a blue color, because that's block 1. And I'm going to sew it to block 2. So we are working on the back side of the fabric. So with right sides together. So this is my green side of my fabric. And I'm going to put that one right on top of that. So I've got my right side. Actually, this looks like it's the right side. I've got my 2 right sides together. And so I'm going to take, I'm going to use this piece of cardboard that was in the add-a-quarter ruler. I'm going to fold back my 2 pieces of fabric, and I'm going to use my add-a-quarter ruler to cut my 1/4 inch seam. So the one thing, I always make sure I cut my 1/4 inch seam before I start this because I'm using a different foot on my sewing machine right now. And I am using, I'm trying to get all this extra out of the way. Sorry, 1 second while I cut the rest of these little pieces out of the way. I am using the 1/4 inch foot on my machine. And so I'm going to tell you why I'm doing that. So I'm going to pick this piece up that I've got ready before you cut it, you got to iron it. So the first thing we're going to do is iron our freezer paper onto our fabric. And just the first line 1 that we're going to be doing, block 1 that we're going to be doing. And the iron is not hot enough. So we're going to wait till the iron gets hot enough, Matt. You're going to have to back up over this. I'm so sorry that this is not
I'm going to unplug and plug it back in.
Working good. So when you first put your 2 right sides together, what we need to do is come over here and put the adhere the piece of adhere our freezer paper to our first block. So we've got that done. So we can pull back. I don't think it's gonna be big enough now. Okay, it will be. So now we can pull back this to where we're on the line right here. We're going to cut our 1/4 inch seam allowance off. So the reason why I cut my 1/4 inch seam allowance in the beginning is because I am using the 1/4 inch foot to make this with. And I want to be able to utilize that. So now we've got our paper fastened to our fabric by adhering it with the freezer with the iron. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep this cardboard in here because I've got this piece folded back against it on the sewing line. And what you're going to do is you're going to sew right next to the sewing line. So the reason why it's important that you cut your 1/4 inch foot, your 1/4 inch, is because you can use that guide to go right up against that freezer paper. You don't want to sew on top of the freezer paper. You're going to sew right next to that guided line. And by having your fabric cut at the 1/4 inch seam already, you can easily get this sewn. So we're going to finish sewing that. Okay, now we got that piece done. You can see that I sewed right next to my, looking for my scissors. They were just right here. I must have, oh, I see them underneath the sewing thing. So I'm going to get those. So I want you to look right here at this, that I have that seam right along just the side of that freezer paper. So I'm going to go to my iron. I'm going to flip this and the paper at the same time. I'm going to flip this to be on the wrong side of the fabric still, and I'm going to press the next section on. And so you just need to give it a quick little press to get the next section down. So you're going to pull up. You might have a little more than what you need pressed, but you're going to pull that up off of the fabric. So now again, I'm going to pull back. I'm going to fold back over the piece I need. I'm going to cut my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to get my white fabric that I need next. Can you find me some white fabric? Matt, put it over there, I think. My white fabric that I need for my next piece. And here's a piece I can use. I'm going to just hit that with the iron real fast so that it gets, so that's a good piece to use. I'm going to match up my 1/4 inch seam right there. And it's much easier if you leave this in the, if you leave the piece of paper or piece of cardstock in there, because then you have something to hold that piece of freezer paper back against. Again, I'm going to come up here, and I have, I'm just using a regular stitch length because I'm not going to have to pull any paper off of this at the end. So I'm just using a regular stitch length and using my 1/4 inch foot to help guide along to stay just to the side of the freezer paper. Okay, got that done. Again, I've sewn just to the side of the freezer paper. So now I'm going to take this piece, press it to the freezer paper. And the one great thing about using freezer paper for this is you can use the same block a couple of times because you haven't sewn over any of the freezer paper. So again, I get it here. I'm on this block right now, number 4, B4. I'm gonna take it, line it up on the sewing line, pull it back, cut away the excess, find a piece of white. All I have is a big strip right now, but that'll be fine. We'll use this big strip. I will put it right there. Line up the, line it up since I didn't cut it underneath there when I was doing it. The 1/4 inch. Line it up right on the 1/4 inch line. Perfect. Bring it over to your sewing machine. Again, keep that piece of paper in there so you have something, or piece of card stuck in there so you have something to hold it against. It's much easier if you have something to hold it against. It's not too thick, but just gives you a little bit of stability with that freezer paper, and then so you can stitch right next to the freezer paper line, next to the freezer paper, not stitching on the freezer paper, but right next to the freezer paper when you're sewing. Okay, got to the end of that line, way past that line. Now, come over to the iron, press the freezer paper down on this, and now we are ready to cut around the block. So I used to cut around the block, I use my large ruler. I'm gonna get this excess out of the way. I still need that one more time. So this is the sewing line, and this is the 1/4 inch seam allowance line. So I'm going to cut on the 1/4 inch seam allowance line. So the one dots line up on your sewing line, while the other dot gives you your seam allowance. So you can cut this easily. Didn't have a strong enough cut right there. You can cut this easily because it's adhered to the paper. Go around the block. Around the block on the outside edge. You're wanting to make sure that you're getting it onto the seam allowance, not cutting the sewing line, because you want to have a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way outside your block. Believe me, I've cut on the wrong line once in my life, or twice in my life, and I've learned how not to cut on the wrong line. So now I've got 2 pieces of it together, and I just need my last piece, which is this one, which is just white. So what I will do is I will adhere it to my paper, or iron it onto the fabric. Cut around it. Getting it lined up perfectly. Cut around it, and voila, we've got our piece cut. Gonna get the last little corners off of this so you don't have any flyaway corners. Okay, we got our piece cut. So now let's see about putting this block together. So this is the first piece that we need to add right here. So what I will do is I will first match up my corners like I do on regular paper piecing. I'm going to stick a pin through this, and I'm going to make sure it's perfect to the other side.
You have a fold.
Pardon?
You have a fold on the.
Yeah, it's okay. So then let's get this one to its side. Okay. So this is exactly where it needs to be. So what I'm going to do is I am going to put a pin right here to hold this together, to hold it in place. So now that you've got it all lined up on both corners, we are going to fold this back. Our 1/4 inch seam, fold that back on this side, take it and fold it back on the other side, because we've got it pinned in place where we want it. And then match up make sure that you still have your 1/4 inch seam allowances lined up. Go pull it past the 1/4 inch seam allowance so that you still have everything matched up here on the side. Bring it to the machine, and that's why we have our 1/4 inch foot on here, so that we can use our 1/4 inch foot to guide us to make the block come together. If I was matching a lot of points and a lot of places, I would do a basting stitch on this to make sure that I had it actually accurate and based where the points come together, so that in case I made a mistake, it'd be easier to take out and look at and change before I actually sew the line in. So a lot of times I will base stitch everything down first before I do it. So now we can pull this piece of paper, this freezer paper off, and this freezer paper off, and these are available to use on your next block. I'm going to give this a quick press. So on my last piece, got to take the piece of, take this off of here, put it right here, match up my, since I did my little, took the corners off, I can see right where it needs to go, because the corners are not there any longer, and it matches up perfectly. I've got my 1/4 inch foot on. Gonna sew this down. Press, and then there's your block. It's completely made, and you have no paper to remove. Oh, I can see that my little, when you go back to press the back, make sure that all the pressing stayed the right direction. That mine got a little wonky just then. Whoop, gonna press that down the right way. So you can see on the back, the paper is completely off. You're ready to start. Your block is done, and you've got no papers to remove. The more complicated and the smaller the block, the harder it is to use freezer paper. You can usually use this particular freezer paper about 3 or 4 times. So you can make 3 or 4 blocks with this one piece. And so it makes it really nice because it is all reusable again, because it will adhere to the next block, and you don't have any paper to remove. So paper piecing with freezer paper is easy to do, and you don't have all the paper, because I know one of our cutters was like, I don't want to pull all the paper off. I don't like pulling all the paper off. And so this is the way to do it without having to pull any paper off. And we still got exact matches on all of our corners and pieces as we came through with this. So anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this quick little lesson on piecing with freezer paper. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot us a thing. Check us out on our YouTube. I also did paper piecing with Carol Duck freezer paper, or with Carol Duck paper right here in a different video in case you want to learn how to do it with paper. And I also showed how to fix a mistake if you make a mistake. Not all of us make mistakes, but sometimes mistakes happen. So anyway, hope you enjoy this video, and I will see you later. Join us for the Riverside Knoll Sew Along if you have a chance. Happy sewing, everybody.